The crystal decanter shattered against mahogany, amber liquid spreading like blood across Julian Cross's execution order. He didn't flinch at the sound. He'd heard worse, done worse, but something made him pause mid-sentence with his enforcers. Through the doorway of his office, he caught a glimpse of movement. The new maid, the black woman with wary eyes and rigid shoulders, reaching to dust the ornate mirror in the hallway. She lifted her arm, and her entire body went rigid for just a second. A barely perceptible wince, a tightening of her jaw, a tremor in her hand before she forced herself to continue. Most wouldn't have noticed. Most wouldn't have cared. Julian Cross noticed everything. It was how he'd survived in his world for 38 years, building an empire from blood and fear. But this flash of suppressed agony in a stranger's face shouldn't have mattered to him at all. It shouldn't have made him excuse himself from discussing territory disputes to follow her down that hallway. It shouldn't have made him wonder what had put that careful, defensive control in every movement she made, or why she wore long sleeves in late summer heat, but it did. Evelyn Brooks had perfected the art of invisibility over 26 years of life. She moved through Julian Cross's sprawling Gothic estate like a ghost, present but unnoticed, essential but ignored. It was exactly how she preferred things, especially now. The dark hardwood floors gleamed under her careful attention, each polished surface reflecting her deep brown face for a split second before she moved on. Her natural hair was pulled back in a tight, professional bun, the coils smoothed down with precision. The long-sleeved black uniform with its white lace trim covered her completely despite the oppressive August heat outside, hiding what needed to stay hidden. Evelyn. Mr. Cross wants the library cleaned before his evening meeting. Mrs. Chin announced, her crisp voice cutting through the quiet afternoon. The head housekeeper's expression remained neutral, but there was concern in her eyes. Are you feeling well? You look pale. I'm fine, Mrs. Chen. Thank you. The lie came easily. Evelyn had been lying about being fine for 4 weeks now. Ever since Marcus had. She cut off the thought, focusing instead on the weight of the cleaning supplies in her hands. The pain in her ribs was manageable. She'd had worse. At least this job paid well enough to keep her in the small apartment she'd found in Brooklyn, to stay off Marcus's radar, to disappear into the kind of household where servants were invisible. Good. Mr. Cross is particular about his space. Mrs. Chen's voice softened slightly. But if you need anything... I'm fine, Evelyn repeated, offering a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She wasn't fine. The bruises hidden beneath her uniform throbbed with each breath, a reminder of her ex-boyfriend's rage when she'd finally worked up the courage to leave. But she was alive. She was working. And she was far enough away from her old neighborhood that Marcus would never think to look for her here, in a monster's house. The library was Julian Cross's private sanctuary. Evelyn had only been working at the estate for 2 weeks, and she'd seen the owner exactly 4 times, each encounter lasting less than a minute. He was exactly what she'd expected from the rumors whispered among the staff. Cold, ruthless, and apparently connected to criminal enterprises that no one discussed openly. The man lived in shadows and moved through the world like death itself, which, considering the reputation of the Cross family, he probably was death for anyone who crossed him. Evelyn began dusting the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a space of dark leather and ornate woodwork with a massive stone fireplace dominating one wall. Everything was precisely arranged. First editions in Italian and English, legal documents she carefully avoided reading, and a single framed photograph of a beautiful woman with Julian's dark eyes, his mother, perhaps. She was reaching for a higher shelf, stretching despite the screaming pain in her ribs, when she heard voices approaching. Male voices speaking in low, tense tones. She recognized Julian Cross's deep, commanding voice immediately, followed by another man's sharper responses. They entered the library without noticing her. Evelyn kept her head down, continuing her work as quietly as possible, trying to blend into the furniture, trying to be invisible the way she'd learned to be invisible around Marcus, when his mood darkened. The iron gates of the Cross estate stood 12 feet high, black as midnight, and topped with spikes that looked less decorative than functional. Evelyn Brooks stared up at them, her single battered suitcase growing heavier in her hand with each passing second, and fought the overwhelming urge to run. The mansion beyond was something from a Gothic nightmare. All dark stone and towering windows that reflected the overcast sky like dead eyes. Ivy crawled up the walls with aggressive determination, and the architecture spoke of old money, the kind built on blood and fear and things people didn't discuss in polite company. Everything about the place screamed danger, from the gargoyles crouching on the roofline to the way the building seemed to swallow light rather than reflect it. Evelyn had heard the stories. Everyone in her old neighborhood had heard the stories about Julian Cross. Ruthless mafia boss. Killer. A man who'd built an empire from violence and maintained it through fear. They said he was without conscience, without mercy, that crossing him meant disappearing in ways that ensured no one ever crossed him again. She should turn around, get back on the bus, find some other way to disappear. But there was no other way. Not anymore. Marcus had made sure of that. The intercom crackled. State your business. The voice was female, clipped, no nonsense. Evelyn Brooks. I'm here for the housekeeping position. A pause. Then the gates swung open with a groan that sounded almost like a warning. Evelyn walked through them anyway. A monster's house, it turned out, was the perfect hiding place for monsters. Marcus would never think to look for her here, in the heart of a world even more dangerous than his fists had ever been. The woman who met her at the servants' entrance was petite, Asian, somewhere in her 50s, with silver threading through her black hair and the kind of posture that spoke of military precision. I'm Mrs. Chun, head housekeeper. You're late. The bus was delayed. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be on time. Mrs. Chen's dark eyes catalogued Evelyn with the efficiency of someone who'd spent decades reading people. Follow me. The servants' corridors were a different world from the Gothic grandeur Evelyn had glimpsed through the windows. Narrow, utilitarian, painted institutional beige. Mrs. Chen moved through them with brisk efficiency, speaking in clipped tones that expected immediate comprehension. You'll be responsible for the private wing. The library. Mr. Cross's study. His bedroom suite when he's traveling. She glanced back. You don't touch his personal effects. You don't read his papers. You don't ask questions. I understand. The other staff clean the public areas, the dining room, the ballroom, the guest suites. You'll work alone most of the time. Mr. Cross values privacy and silence. Mrs. Chin stopped at a door, producing a ring of keys. If you encounter him, you don't speak unless spoken to. You don't stare. You don't exist. Are we clear? Perfect, Evelyn thought. Not existing was what she did best. Yes, ma'am. The room Mrs. Chin showed her to was small but clean, a single bed with white linens and narrow dresser, a window that looked out over the estate's rear gardens. It was more than Evelyn had dare hope for. More importantly, it came with a lock on the door. Uniforms are in the closet. You start at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Breakfast is at 5:30 in the staff dining room. Mrs. Chin paused in the doorway. He's not cruel to staff, Miss Brooks. But he's not kind either. He simply doesn't notice us, and that's how we prefer it. Understood? Understood. When the door closed, Evelyn sat on the bed and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her ribs ached. They always ached now, a constant reminder of her last night in Marcus's apartment. She touched them gently through her shirt, feeling the tender places where his fists had connected, where she'd thought she might actually die. You think you can leave me? You think you're going anywhere? His hands around her throat, the world going gray at the edges. Her desperate clawing, the lamp she'd grabbed, the sickening crack when it connected with his skull. His grip loosening just enough. Her running, barefoot, bleeding, not stopping until she was 3 neighborhoods away. Evelyn shook her head, banishing the memory. She was safe now. Or as safe as anyone could be in a house owned by Julian Cross. She unpacked her meager belongings, 3 changes of clothes, toiletries, the photograph of her mother she'd grabbed on her way out. Everything else she owned was still in Marcus's apartment, but she'd never go back for it. Material things could be replaced. Her life couldn't. As she hung her clothes in the narrow closet, movement outside the window caught her eye. A man stood in the gardens below, his back to her. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed entirely in black. Even from this distance, she could see the tattoos crawling up his neck, disappearing into his dark hair. He was on his phone, his free hand gesturing with controlled precision that somehow managed to convey threat even in silhouette. Julian Cross. It had to be. Evelyn stepped back from the window instinctively, her heart rate kicking up. He was exactly what she'd imagined, imposing, dangerous, the kind of man who moved through the world like he owned it because he probably did own significant pieces of it. He turned slightly, and she caught a glimpse of his profile. Sharp features, strong jaw, an expression of cold calculation that made her chest tight with familiar fear. She'd traded one monster for another. But at least this monster didn't know she existed. At least this monster's violence wasn't directed at her. At least here, in the shadows of his Gothic estate, she could disappear into invisibility and try to piece together what was left of her shattered life. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all she had. Evelyn pulled the curtain closed and turned away from the window, forcing herself to breathe through the anxiety tightening her chest. Tomorrow, she would start work. Tomorrow, she would become invisible. Tomorrow, she would begin the careful process of surviving in a monster's house. Tonight, she would lock her door and try to sleep without dreaming of hands around her throat. 3 days of invisibility felt like a victory. Evelyn had perfected the art of moving through Julian Cross's estate like a ghost, arriving before he woke, leaving after he retired, managing to clean entire rooms while he worked elsewhere. She'd caught glimpses of him through doorways and windows, but never close enough to speak, never close enough to register as more than a shadow in his peripheral vision. It was exactly what she wanted, what she needed. Then came the afternoon of the 4th day. Mrs. Chun had sent her to clean Julian's office, a task that should have been safe, scheduled during his usual meeting time downtown. But when Evelyn pushed open the heavy oak door, arms full of cleaning supplies, she found him there. Julian sat at his massive mahogany desk, head bent over paperwork, a pen moving across documents with decisive strokes. He wore all black as always, dress shirt rolled to his elbows, revealing tattooed forearms that spoke of violence and loyalty in equal measure. 2 men in dark suits stood across from him, their expressions carefully neutral. Evelyn froze in the doorway, her heart rate spiking. She should leave. Should back out quietly before. I don't care what excuse Lorenzo gives. Julian's voice was cold, controlled, deadly calm. He knew the rules. He broke them. The penalty is clear. He signed something with a flourish and slid it across the desk. One of the suited men picked it up, and Evelyn caught a glimpse of the header. Termination order. Her blood turned to ice. Not termination like firing. Termination like... The crystal decanter exploded against the desk's edge. Evelyn flinched violently at the sound, and something inside her tore. Sharp, agonizing pain lanced through her ribs. Old injuries from Marcus's fists, internal damage that had never healed properly, splitting open under the sudden stress and movement. She gasped, one hand flying to her side, and felt warmth bloom across her white blouse. Blood. She was bleeding. Get it done by Friday. Julian was still talking to his men, hadn't noticed her yet. And make sure the message is clear. Loyalty is rewarded. Betrayal is. He looked up. His dark eyes locked on Evelyn standing in the doorway, and she watched his gaze track from her face down to her hand pressed against her ribs, to the crimson spreading across white fabric like a damning confession. You're bleeding. His voice cut through her shock like a blade. I'm fine, Mr. Cross. Evelyn backed toward the hallway, her vision starting to tunnel at the edges. I'll come back later. You're bleeding, he repeated, standing. The 2 suited men exchanged glances, but didn't move. What happened? Nothing. It's nothing. I just need to. The world tilted. Evelyn's legs went liquid beneath her, and she had the distant thought that she was going to hit the hardwood floor very hard. But then strong arms caught her, lifting her with surprising gentleness. She blinked up at Julian's face, close enough now to see the faint scar along his jawline, the intensity in eyes she'd been too afraid to meet directly before. "Who hurt you?" The question was delivered with protective fury, not accusation. His jaw clenched as he looked down at the blood soaking through her uniform. "And don't lie to me. I know what violence looks like. I know the difference between an accident and someone's fists." Evelyn's head swam. She should be terrified. She was in the arms of a man who'd just signed someone's death warrant. But his touch was careful, controlled, his hands supporting her weight without causing additional pain. "That was a long time ago," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. Not long enough for it to have healed properly. Julian's expression darkened. He turned toward the doorway, his voice rising to a bellow that made her flinch. "Mrs. Chun, get Dr. Santos here. Now. Tell her it's urgent." The suited men finally moved, one of them pulling out a phone. Julian adjusted his grip on Evelyn, lifting her more securely against his chest, and strode from the office with long, purposeful strides. "Mr. Cross, you don't have to." Evelyn tried to protest, but her words came out slurred. Blood loss and shock were pulling her under. "Be quiet." The command was firm, but not unkind. "Save your strength." He carried her through corridors she'd only cleaned, past wide-eyed staff members who pressed themselves against walls as their employer passed. Mrs. Chin appeared ahead of them, her face pale with shock. "Mr. Cross, what happened?" "I don't know yet. But she's bleeding internally, old injuries that reopened." "Where's the nearest guest room?" "The blue room is just." "Get it ready. Fresh linens. Hot water. Whatever Dr. Santos will need." Julian shouldered through a doorway into a bedroom Evelyn had dusted just yesterday, all cream silk and antique furniture far too expensive for a maid to bleed on. He laid her on the bed with careful precision, his hands already working the buttons of her blood-soaked uniform. "How long until the doctor arrives?" 20 minutes, maybe less." Mrs. Chin appeared with towels, her professional mask firmly in place despite her obvious confusion. "Should I call an ambulance?" "No." Dr. Santos is discreet. Julian peeled back Evelyn's uniform blouse, revealing the sports bra beneath and the livid bruising that spread across her ribs, purple and yellow and green, weeks old, but still visible. His expression went completely blank, which somehow made it more frightening. "Get me the first aid kit, and then give us privacy." "Mr. Cross." "Now, Mrs. Chen." When they were alone, Julian pressed a towel to Evelyn's side, applying careful pressure. His dark eyes met hers, and she saw rage there, cold, calculating rage that made her breath catch. "Who did this to you?" His voice was deadly calm. "Give me a name." "Why?" Evelyn's words came out weak. "So you can sign another termination order?" "Yes." The single word was absolute. "Exactly that." I don't even know you." She tried to focus through the pain and dizziness. "You're just my employer. You don't care about. You work for me. That makes you mine to protect." Julian's jaw clenched. "Someone hurt you badly enough that you're bleeding in my house weeks later. That's my business now. So I'll ask again. Who did this to you?" Evelyn's vision blurred with tears she refused to shed. This man, this dangerous, violent man who killed people and ruled through fear, was looking at her like her pain mattered. Like she mattered. "Marcus," she whispered. "His name is Marcus Jennings. My ex-boyfriend." Julian's hand tightened on the towel. "Where is he now?" "I don't know. Brooklyn, maybe. I ran. Changed my address, my phone number. I thought if I disappeared." "You did the right thing." His voice softened fractionally. "Running was smart. But you should have had someone to run to who'd make sure he never came after you. I didn't have anyone. You do now." Julian's dark eyes held hers with unwavering intensity. "You work for me. You're under my protection. And I protect what's mine." Before Evelyn could respond, Dr. Santos arrived, a competent woman in her 50s who took one look at the situation and immediately began issuing orders. Julian stepped back but didn't leave, positioning himself by the window while the doctor examined Evelyn's injuries. Internal bleeding from improperly healed trauma, Dr. Santos confirmed grimly. She needs rest, proper pain management, and monitoring. These injuries should have been treated months ago. What kind of monster? The kind that's going to regret ever laying hands on her, Julian said quietly. Evelyn's eyes were closing, exhaustion and medication pulling her under. But she heard his voice, felt his presence like a shield between her and the world that had hurt her. For the first time in months, she felt safe. Even if that safety came from a monster. Evelyn woke to silk. That was her first conscious thought. Not the throbbing pain in her ribs or the fog of medication, but the impossible softness of sheets that cost more than 3 months of her rent. She blinked at the coffered ceiling above her, disoriented by the ornate plasterwork and the warm glow of firelight dancing across cream-colored walls. This wasn't her narrow room in the servants' quarters. Memory returned in fragments, the decanter shattering, blood blooming across her white blouse, Julian Cross's dark eyes going sharp with something that looked almost like concern. His hands catching her before she fell. Then darkness. "You're awake." The voice came from the doorway, a woman's voice, professional and calm. "Good." I was beginning to worry about the blood loss. Evelyn turned her head carefully and found a middle-aged Latino woman in a white coat approaching the bed. A doctor's bag sat open on the dresser, medical supplies spread across its polished surface.
"I'm Dr. Santos."
"Mr. Cross called me to examine you." She pulled a chair close to the bed and sat, her expression kind but assessing. "You gave everyone quite a scare. Can you tell me your pain level, 1 to 10? 6. Maybe 7. Evelyn's voice came out hoarse. "What happened?" "You collapsed from internal bleeding. Old injuries that never healed properly, reopened by stress and physical exertion." Dr. Santos pulled out a penlight, checking Evelyn's pupils with practiced efficiency. "These injuries should have been treated months ago." "Who did this to you?" The question hung in the air. Evelyn looked away, toward the fire crackling softly in the hearth. "That's not important. It's important to me." Another voice, deeper, from the doorway. Julian Cross stood there with a tray in his hands, a ceramic bowl releasing steam, thick bread, a glass of water, pill bottles arranged with precise spacing. "Dr. Santos asked you a question." "Mr. Cross, patient confidentiality," Dr. Santos began. "Applies when the patient is in my house under my protection and someone put her here." Julian's dark eyes never left Evelyn's face. "I don't like mysteries in my home." But he didn't push further. He simply crossed the room and set the tray on the bedside table with careful precision. Evelyn found herself staring at his hands, tattooed, scarred, hands that had undoubtedly killed. Yet they arranged the bowl and spoon with the same meticulous attention she'd seen him apply to his studies organization.
"Soup.
Plain, so it won't upset your stomach. Bread if you can manage it. Pain medication and antibiotics." He stepped back. "Dr. Santos says you need at least 4 weeks of rest. No heavy lifting. No stress. You'll stay here until you're healed. I can't afford. You work for me. That makes you my responsibility." His tone left no room for argument. "I don't let my staff work injured." Dr. Santos stood, gathering her supplies. "I'll check on you tomorrow. Mr. Cross has my number if anything changes." She paused at the door. "Rest, Miss Brooks. Let yourself heal properly this time." When she left, silence filled the room except for the fire's soft crackling. Julian remained by the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the darkening gardens. "You should eat," he said without turning, "while it's hot." Evelyn struggled to sit up, biting back a gasp as her ribs protested. Immediately, Julian was there, hands firm but gentle on her shoulders, helping her upright, adjusting pillows behind her back. The sudden proximity made her flinch, an involuntary reaction to a man moving toward her too quickly. He froze. Something flickered across his expression, recognition, perhaps. Understanding. I'm not going to hurt you, he said quietly, stepping back to give her space. Whatever you're running from, whoever put those bruises on you, that doesn't happen here. Not in my house. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Over the following days, Evelyn discovered that Julian Cross was a man of patterns. He appeared each morning at 8 with breakfast, returned at noon with lunch, again at 6 with dinner. He checked her bandages with clinical efficiency, his touch impersonal but gentle, and arranged her medications in a precise line on the bedside table. He never asked about Marcus. Never pushed for answers she wasn't ready to give. Sometimes he simply sat in the leather chair by the fire, reading while she slept. Evelyn would wake to find him there, absorbed in whatever book he'd brought, thick volumes of philosophy, Russian literature, poetry she wouldn't have expected from a man whose reputation was built on violence. "What are you reading?" she asked on the third day, emboldened by pain medication and the surreal intimacy of having him in her room. He glanced up from his book. Dostoevsky. Crime and Punishment. Heavy reading. I prefer books that understand the weight of choices. He closed it, revealing the worn cover. What about you? What do you read? I used to read everything. Before, she stopped herself. I wanted to be a teacher. English literature. But life had other plans. Something shifted in his expression. Life usually does. The conversation drifted into silence, but it was different than before. Less tense, more comfortable. Julian returned to his book. Evelyn dozed. The fire crackled. Outside, rain began to fall against the windows. It was during one of these quiet afternoons that Mrs. Chen knocked, entering with fresh linens. She paused when she saw Julian in the chair, her eyebrows rising almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Cross, I didn't realize you were here. Just checking on Miss Brooks's progress." He stood, closing his book. "She seems to be healing well." Indeed. Mrs. Chen began changing the water pitcher, her movements efficient but her gaze thoughtful. When Julian left the room, she turned to Evelyn with an expression that was equal parts curiosity and concern. "In 15 years of working for Mr. Cross, I've never seen him care for anyone like this. He has doctors, nurses, staff for every conceivable need." She smoothed the fresh linens. "But he comes himself, 3 times a day." Evelyn didn't know what to say to that. She watched Mrs. Chen work, mind churning with the same question that had been haunting her since she woke in this room. Why was he doing this? What did he want from her? That evening, when Julian arrived with dinner, Evelyn finally asked, "Why are you doing this?" The words came out more direct than intended, edged with a fear she couldn't quite suppress. "I'm just a maid. You could have fired me, sent me to a hospital. Why do you care?" Julian set the tray down carefully. For a long moment he didn't answer. Then he pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat, his dark eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Because I've seen enough broken things in my life to recognize when something's worth saving," he said quietly. "And because whoever hurt you, whoever made you flinch when a man moves too quickly, whoever put that fear in your eyes, they don't get to win."
His jaw tightened.
"You work for me now. You're under my protection. And I protect what's mine." The words should have terrified her. Should have sounded like possession, like Marcus's twisted logic that she belonged to him. But the gentleness in Julian's touch when he'd helped her sit up, the care in his voice, the way he gave her space when she flinched, that told a different story entirely. Evelyn's fear didn't disappear. But for the first time in months, it began to crack. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight, turning the estate's gardens into a watercolor of gray and green beyond the guest room windows. Evelyn was strong enough now to sit in the chair by the fire, wrapped in a cashmere throw that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. Julian sat across from her, a chessboard between them that he'd brought 2 days ago, teaching her the game with patient precision. "Your queen is exposed," he said, studying the board. "You're thinking 3 moves ahead, but I'm thinking 6. That's depressing. That's survival. He moved his knight, capturing her bishop. In my world, you don't get second chances. You calculate every possibility, or you die. Evelyn moved her rook, a defensive play she knew wouldn't save her. Is that what your father taught you? To always be 6 moves ahead. Julian's hand stilled over a pawn. For a moment, she thought she'd crossed a line, pushed too far into territory he'd kept carefully guarded. But then he leaned back in his chair, his dark eyes finding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. My father taught me that weakness gets you killed. That mercy is a luxury we can't afford. That the only way to survive in this world is to become harder than everything trying to break you. His jaw tightened. He taught me through his fists, through my mother's screams, through the blood on our kitchen floor the night he finally went too far and someone put a bullet in his head. The casual brutality of the words should have frightened her. Instead, Evelyn found herself leaning forward slightly. How old were you? 12. He picked up his fallen bishop, turning it over in his scarred hands. Old enough to understand what he was, but too young to stop him. My mother, his voice roughened. She tried to protect me. Every beating I avoided, she took instead. Until the night, she couldn't anymore. Julian. I'm not a good man, Evelyn. He set the chess piece down with careful precision. I've done terrible things since that night. I'll do terrible things again. I've built an empire on violence and fear, and I don't apologize for it. His eyes met hers. But I keep my word, and I protect what's mine. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning she wasn't sure she was ready to unpack. Evelyn pulled the throw tighter around her shoulders, feeling suddenly exposed despite being fully clothed. Am I yours? The question escaped before she could stop it, emboldened by pain medication and the strange intimacy of rain and firelight and confessions. Julian's gaze didn't waver. You're under my protection. That makes you untouchable. That's not the same thing.
No.
It's not. He stood, moving to the window, his back to her. The tattoos on his neck were visible above his collar, intricate designs she'd been too afraid to study closely until now. Tell me about him. The man who hurt you. Evelyn's ribs tightened, phantom pain mixing with real.
Why?
Because I need to know what I'm protecting you from. She should have deflected, should have changed the subject. But something about the set of Julian's shoulders, the careful control in his voice, made her want to trust him with the truth. His name is Marcus Jennings. The words tasted like ash. We met 2 years ago. He was charming at first, attentive, everything I thought I wanted after years of being alone. She laughed bitterly. Then he started checking my phone, questioning where I went, who I talked to. It was gradual, so gradual I didn't notice I was being suffocated until I couldn't breathe anymore. Julian's hands fisted against the window frame, but he didn't turn around. The first time he hit me, he cried, apologized. Swore it would never happen again. Evelyn touched her ribs unconsciously. I believed him. I believed him the second time too. The third. By the fourth, I stopped counting. I tried to leave 3 times I tried. But he always found me. Always convinced me to come back. Until the last time. Now Julian turned, and the expression on his face was terrifying in its coldness. What happened the last time? He put his hands around my throat and told me if I ever tried to leave again, he'd kill me. Her voice remained steady despite the memories clawing up her throat. I believed that too. So I waited until he was drunk enough to pass out, and I grabbed the first heavy thing I could reach, a lamp, and I hit him. And then I ran. Give me his name again. Julian's voice was dead calm, which somehow made it more frightening. His full name, where he lives. Where he works. Why? So you can kill him. Evelyn stood, the throw falling away, anger cutting through her fear. I didn't escape one monster to watch another become one for me. Julian crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just outside her personal space, close enough that she could see the muscle jumping in his jaw. I'm already a monster, Evelyn. I've been a monster since I was 12 years old and learned that the world doesn't reward mercy. His voice dropped lower. But I could be your monster. The kind that keeps you safe instead of making you afraid. The words should have been possessive, threatening, wrong in every way that mattered. But standing there, looking up at this dangerous man who tended her wounds with gentle hands and sat by her bedside reading Dostoevsky, Evelyn realized something that turned her understanding sideways. Violence in her defense felt nothing like violence against her. I don't want you to kill him, she said quietly. I just want to be free of him. To not wake up every morning wondering if today's the day he finds me. Then that's what you'll have. Julian's hands came up slowly, telegraphing the movement, giving her time to retreat. When she didn't, he cupped her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything about his reputation. He'll never touch you again. I give you my word. Not a promise. A fact. Evelyn should have been terrified. Should have recognized the possessiveness in his tone, the danger in his certainty. Instead, for the first time in years, she felt safe. Over the following week, as her ribs continued healing, Julian began teaching her things that had nothing to do with chess. How to break a grip on her wrist, where to strike to cause maximum pain with minimum strength, how to read body language for aggressive intent. You'll never be helpless again, he said, guiding her through another defensive movement. His hands were firm on her shoulders, positioning her correctly. Not while I'm here to teach you. And not after, when you have the skills to protect yourself. Why does this matter so much to you? Evelyn asked, breathing hard from the exertion. Her ribs ached, but it was a good ache, the ache of healing, of growing stronger. Julian's hands slid away, but his dark eyes held hers. Because I see myself in you. The version of me that existed before I learned to fight back. Before I became what I am. He touched the tattoo on his neck, a delicate rose wrapped in thorns that she now knew represented his mother. Every person I've lost, everyone I've failed to protect, I carry them here. Permanent reminders of what happens when you're not strong enough. And you don't want to add me to that collection.
No.
The single word carried the weight of everything unsaid between them. I don't. Evelyn stepped closer, close enough to see the faint scar along his jawline, the shadow of stubble, the vulnerability he tried so hard to hide beneath layers of calculated violence. Then don't. Help me become strong enough that no one can hurt me again. Julian's hand came up, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. That's exactly what I intend to do. And standing there, wrapped in a monster's protection, Evelyn felt the last of her fear begin to transform into something far more dangerous. Trust. The October air carried the scent of dying leaves and wood smoke when Evelyn finally ventured outside. 6 weeks of healing had left her stronger, though her ribs still protested sudden movements. Dr. Santos had cleared her for light activity, and the guest room, beautiful as it was, had started to feel like a gilded cage. Julian met her at the garden entrance, dressed in his usual black, hands in his pockets. You should have someone with you. Security. Is that what you are? Evelyn pulled her borrowed cardigan tighter, feeling the autumn chill despite the afternoon sun. My security? Something flickered in his dark eyes. Among other things. They walked in silence, through paths lined with manicured hedges and flower beds preparing for winter. Leaves drifted down around them in shades of amber and crimson, carpeting the stone walkway with nature's countdown to the cold. Evelyn found herself hyper-aware of Julian beside her, the way he moved with predatory grace, the tension in his shoulders that never quite left, the careful distance he maintained as if afraid to get too close. You don't have to walk with me, she said, pausing by a fountain where stone angels wept into a pool of fallen leaves. I'm sure you have more important things to do than babysit your recovering maid. You're not my maid anymore. Then what am I? The question hung between them, weighted with 6 weeks of careful touches and quiet conversations, of chess games and self-defense lessons, of walls crumbling despite both of them trying desperately to keep them standing. Julian stopped walking. He turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. I don't know. I've never wanted to protect something this badly. I've never cared if someone saw who I really am.
His jaw tightened.
I've never been afraid of what I might lose. Evelyn's heart hammered against her healing ribs. What am I to you really? More than you should be. He took a step closer, close enough that she could see the faint scar along his jawline, the shadow of exhaustion beneath his eyes, the vulnerability he tried so hard to hide. More than is safe for either of us. Julian. I'm a killer, Evelyn. The words came out rough, urgent, as if he needed her to understand the truth before they crossed a line neither could uncross. A criminal. Someone who's built everything on violence and fear. I've done things that would horrify you if you knew the details. I'll do them again without hesitation if that's what it takes to keep you safe. He cupped her face with both hands, his tattooed fingers gentle despite their capacity for violence. But when you look at me, when you see me, not the reputation or the fear or the monster everyone knows I am, I want to be someone better. Someone worthy of that look in your eyes. Evelyn's hands came up to cover his, feeling the scars on his knuckles, the strength in his grip tempered by devastating gentleness. And who are you really? Beneath everything else. Someone who'll burn the world down for you. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Someone who hasn't felt human in 26 years until you flinched away from me, and I realized I cared more about your fear than my own reputation. The kiss happened like gravity, inevitable, dangerous, transformative. Julian's lips met hers with a tenderness that contradicted everything she knew about him, everything she'd been told to fear. His hands stayed gentle on her face, holding her as if she were something precious, something that might break if he gripped too tightly. Evelyn's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer despite the voice in her head screaming warnings. He tasted like coffee and danger, and the promise of safety she'd stopped believing in. When he deepened the kiss, his tongue sliding against hers, she felt 6 weeks of careful distance collapse into desperate need. They broke apart breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. The world narrowed to this moment, this garden, this impossible thing growing between them. This is a bad idea, Evelyn whispered, even as her hands refused to release their grip on his shirt. Julian's thumb traced her lower lip, his dark eyes molten. The best things usually are. You're dangerous. Yes. You kill people. Yes. I should be terrified of you. You should. His hand slid to the back of her neck, fingers threading through her hair. But you're not. Are you? Evelyn searched his face, seeing the monster everyone feared, and the man only she was allowed to witness.
No.
I don't see a monster anymore when I look at you. I don't know what that makes me.
Meaning.
The word was possessive, absolute. If you'll let me. Not as my employee. Not as someone under my protection, though you'll always have that. His jaw clenched. As something more. Something I have no right to ask for, but can't stop myself from wanting. Everything you touch, you said your father taught you that violence is survival. Everything I touch, I destroy. Julian finished, his voice raw. I know. Believe me, I know. Every instinct I have tells me to push you away before I ruin you the way I ruin everything beautiful that comes into my life. His grip tightened in her hair. But I can't let you go. I've tried. God knows I've tried to maintain distance, to stay clinical, to treat you like any other staff member. And I can't. Evelyn pulled back enough to meet his eyes fully. Then don't. Don't push me away. Don't decide what I can handle. She touched the tattoo on his neck. The rose wrapped in thorns. I've spent 2 years with someone who claimed to love me while he hurt me. You've spent 6 weeks tending my wounds and teaching me to fight back. You've been gentle when you could have been cruel. Patient when you could have been demanding. Her voice dropped. You've let me see your scars, Julian. Let me decide if I'm brave enough to bear the weight of them. Evelyn. I'm choosing you. The words came out steady despite her racing heart. I'm choosing this. Whatever this is. Even knowing it's dangerous. Even knowing you're dangerous. Julian's control cracked. He kissed her again, deeper this time, with less restraint. His hands slid down her back, pulling her against him carefully, mindful of her healing ribs. Evelyn gasped against his mouth, feeling the solid wall of his chest, the barely leashed strength in his arms, the way he trembled slightly, as if afraid she might disappear. "I'll never hurt you," he murmured against her lips, between kisses that grew more desperate. "I swear to you, Evelyn, I'll never be like him. I'll never make you afraid of me. I know, but I'll hurt anyone who tries to hurt you." His voice hardened. "I'll destroy anyone who comes near you with bad intentions. I'll burn down everything, if that's what it takes to keep you safe. I know that too." She pulled back, cupping his face in her hands. "And it should terrify me, but it doesn't. Is that wrong?" "I don't care if it is." Julian kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her nose, everywhere but her mouth, as if savoring each moment. "You're mine now, and I protect what's mine." They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other, surrounded by falling leaves and the approaching chill of winter. Neither noticed the shadow beyond the garden wall, where someone stood watching through the iron bars with rage burning in familiar eyes. Marcus Jennings had finally found her, and he'd seen everything. When Julian finally led Evelyn back toward the mansion, their hands intertwined, neither spoke. They'd crossed a threshold, stepped over a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Employee and employer. Protector and protected. Something far more dangerous and infinitely more precious. The autumn leaves continued to fall around them, counting down to the storm they couldn't see gathering just beyond the walls of their fragile sanctuary. Evelyn found the dead rose when she returned from dinner. It lay across her pillow in the guest room like a promise of violence, petals black with decay, thorns still wickedly sharp, tied with a ribbon the color of dried blood. Her hand froze on the doorknob, ice flooding her veins as her brain processed what she was seeing.
No.
Not here. Not in Julian's house. Not in the one place she'd finally felt safe. The note was tucked beneath the stem, her name written in handwriting she'd recognize anywhere. Marcus's careful script, each letter formed with the same meticulous control he'd used when his hands were around her throat. "You can't hide from me forever. You're mine. Always have been, always will be.
See you soon, baby."
The world tilted. Evelyn's breath came in short, sharp gasps that didn't seem to bring any oxygen. Her ribs locked tight. Her vision tunneled. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she recognized the signs of a panic attack, but knowing didn't help. Nothing helped except the primal scream building in her chest that she couldn't release because if she started screaming, she might never stop. "Evelyn." Julian's voice came from behind her, concerned. He'd walked her back from the dining room, had been saying goodnight when she'd opened the door. Now his hand was on her shoulder, gentle but firm. "What's wrong?" She couldn't answer. Couldn't do anything except stare at that dead rose and the promise it represented. Julian moved past her into the room, and she heard the exact moment he saw it. The sharp intake of breath, the sudden silence that felt more dangerous than shouting. When he turned back to her, his face had gone completely blank, wiped clean of all emotion except for something cold and lethal flickering in his dark eyes. "Get out of this room.
Now."
His voice was dead calm, which somehow made it more terrifying. He took her arm, pulling her into the hallway, and called out sharply, "Vincent, Mrs. Churn."
Now.
His lieutenant appeared first, gun already drawn, followed by Mrs. Chun looking alarmed. Julian pointed toward the guest room. "Someone got into my house. Into her room. I want every inch of this estate searched, every camera reviewed, every staff member accounted for, and I want to know how the fuck this happened." Vincent's jaw clenched as he peered into the room and saw the rose. "Boss."
Do it. Now.
As Vincent hurried away, barking orders into his phone, Julian turned to Mrs. Chen. "Pack Miss Brooks's things. Everything. She's moving to the master wing immediately." "Julian, I can't," Evelyn started, but he cut her off with a look. "You can and you will. You're moving to my room, where I can keep you safe every second, where no one can get to you without going through me first. His hands came up to frame her face, and she realized she was still hyperventilating. Breathe, Evelyn. Look at me and breathe. He's not here. He can't touch you. I won't let him. He found me. Her voice came out broken, terrified. He knows where I am. He got into your house, Julian. Into my room. If he can do that, he won't do it again. The promise in Julian's voice was absolute. I don't care what it takes. I don't care who I have to threaten or how many people I have to hurt. He doesn't get near you. Ever. 20 minutes later, Evelyn stood in Julian's bedroom, a space of dark wood and leather, masculine and imposing, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the estate grounds. Mrs. Chun had unpacked her meager belongings into the massive walk-in closet, then left them alone with a worried glance. Julian was on his phone, speaking in rapid, clipped tones to his security team. I want cameras on every entrance. Armed guards on rotation. No one comes or goes without my personal authorization. I don't care if it's excessive, Vincent. Someone got past our security once. It doesn't happen twice. He ended the call and turned to find Evelyn standing by the window, hugging herself despite the room's warmth. You'll sleep here tonight, he said, gesturing to the massive bed that dominated the room. I'll take the couch in my office. You don't have to. Yes, I do. He moved closer but didn't touch her, as if sensing she was too fragile right now for physical contact. You're terrified. You've been triggered back to every moment of fear he put you through. The last thing you need is me crowding you. He's going to kill me. The words escaped before she could stop them, raw and terrified. You can't stop him forever, Julian. He's obsessed. He won't stop until I end him. Julian's voice was flat, final. Which is exactly what's going to happen. You can't just. I can. I will. He turned away, running a hand through his hair in a rare display of frustration. Everyone I've ever loved dies, Evelyn. My mother. My brother. Everyone I've tried to protect. I can't, his voice roughened. I can't let that be you. I won't survive it. The confession cracked something open in Evelyn's chest. She crossed to him, her hands finding his despite her fear, despite everything. Then don't think about death. Don't think about loss. How can I not when? Love me angry. She pulled his hands to her face, holding them there. Love me scared. Love me however you need to. But love me while I'm alive, Julian. Don't waste what we have being afraid of what we might lose. His control finally broke. Julian pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her with desperate strength, his face buried in her hair. I'm going to kill him for this. For making you afraid. For putting that terror back in your eyes. I know. I'm going to make it hurt. I know that too. Evelyn held him tighter, feeling his heart racing against her cheek. They stood like that for a long time, the monster and the woman who'd seen past his armor, clinging to each other while danger gathered in the shadows. That night, Evelyn lay in Julian's bed, surrounded by his scent, leather and smoke and something darker. He'd taken the leather couch across the room despite her protests, positioning himself between her and the door. She could hear his breathing in the darkness, steady and controlled. Julian, I'm here. Thank you. For everything. Silence. Then, sleep, Evelyn. I'll keep watch. Nothing's getting to you tonight. She believed him. Against all logic, against all her learned fear, she believed him completely. But neither of them knew that across the city, in a warehouse that reeked of violence and greed, Antonio Russo sat in his office, watching surveillance footage on repeat. Footage of Julian Cross and his maid kissing in the garden. Footage of them walking hand in hand. Footage of the feared mafia boss looking at a woman like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Interesting, Russo murmured, pausing on a frame where Julian's face showed rare vulnerability. He picked up his phone, dialing a familiar number. I have a proposition for you, Mr. Jennings. About a mutual problem we both seem to have. On the other end of the line, Marcus Jennings smiled. The feared Julian Cross, it turned out, had the alarm started screaming at 2:47 in the afternoon. Evelyn was in the library, curled in the leather chair by the window with a copy of Jane Eyre, when a shrill sound cut through the quiet. Her first thought was fire. Her second was that Julian security had finally caught Marcus trying to breach the estate walls. She never imagined he was already inside. Well, Jane Eyre. You always did have a thing for dark, brooding men. The voice froze her blood. Evelyn's head snapped up to find Marcus standing in the library doorway, and the book tumbled from her nerveless fingers. He looked different, thinner, harder, with rage burning in eyes she'd once thought kind. A purple bruise mottled his temple where she'd hit him with the lamp 3 months ago. Did you think you could leave me? Marcus stepped into the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded like a death sentence. Did you think hiding in some rich asshole's house would keep you safe? Evelyn stood on shaking legs, her mind screaming at her to run, even as PTSD crashed over her in waves. Her ribs locked tight. Her vision tunneled. Every self-defense move Julian had taught her evaporated in the face of her terror. I'm not going back. Her voice came out thin, reedy. You can't make me. Can't I? Marcus moved closer, his smile cruel. You're mine, Evelyn. You've always been mine. And I'm tired of waiting for you to remember that. His hand shot out, fingers closing around her throat exactly the way they had that final night in his apartment. Evelyn's body remembered before her mind caught up. The pressure, the panic, the certainty she was going to die. But then Julian's voice echoed in her memory. You'll never be helpless again. She drove her knee up hard between Marcus's legs. He howled, his grip loosening just enough. Evelyn twisted, using the technique Julian had drilled into her over and over, breaking free and running for the door. She made it to the hallway, gasping for air, before Marcus recovered and came after her. You bitch. He caught her arm, spinning her around and slamming her against the wall hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs. His hand went back to her throat, squeezing. I'm going to teach you what happens when you run from me. I'm going to get your hands off her. Julian's voice was death itself. Marcus turned just as Julian's fist connected with his face, a sickening crunch of bone and cartilage. Marcus went down, blood spurting from his shattered nose, but Julian didn't stop. He hauled Marcus up by his collar and hit him again, and again. Each blow precise, controlled, calculated to cause maximum pain without killing. Julian, stop. Vincent appeared with 2 other guards, trying to pull his boss back. Boss, he's not worth it. He put his hands on her. Julian shook them off, delivering another devastating punch to Marcus's ribs. He came into my house. Put his hands around her throat. In my house. Marcus was sobbing now, trying to curl into a protective ball, but Julian wasn't done. He grabbed Marcus by the hair, forcing his head up, so their eyes met. If you ever breathe her name again, Julian said, his voice dead calm despite the blood on his knuckles, I'll find you. And I'll take days to kill you. Do you understand me? Yes, Marcus whimpered. Yes, I understand. Get him out. Julian released Marcus like he was contaminated, letting the guards drag him away. Throw him past the gates. Make sure every hospital in the city knows his face. If anyone treats him, I want to know about it. Boss, Vincent started.
Do it.
And fire whoever let him onto my property. I want their name in the next hour. Julian turned to Evelyn, and she saw his expression shift from lethal fury to desperate concern. Are you hurt? Did he?
I'm okay.
The words came out shaky. I fought back. Like you taught me. I fought back. Something broke in Julian's face. He pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her with trembling strength.
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. I should have been here. I should have. You were. Evelyn held him tighter. You came. That's what matters. An hour later, after statements to his security team and Dr. Santos checking Evelyn for injuries, she found Julian alone in his office. He sat at his desk, staring at his bloodied knuckles with an expression she couldn't read. Marcus's blood had dried dark between his fingers, under his nails, across the intricate tattoos. "Are you afraid of me now?" he asked without looking up. "Now that you've seen what I'm capable of when someone threatens what's mine?" Evelyn closed the door behind her and crossed to him. She took his violent hands in hers, studying the damage he'd inflicted, the evidence of his protective fury. Then she lifted them to her lips and kissed each bloody knuckle. "I've never been less afraid," she said quietly. Julian's breath hitched. "Evelyn, you could have killed him. You wanted to. I saw it in your eyes." She met his gaze steadily. "But you didn't. You controlled it. You stopped. Only because Vincent was there. Only because I knew you were watching." His jaw clenched. "I wanted to tear him apart for touching you, for making you afraid. I still want to. I know." She moved around the desk, positioning herself between his legs, her hands cupping his face. "But you didn't. You were violent, yes. Brutal. But you were violent in my defense, Julian. Not against me. And that's the difference between you and him. How can you stand to touch me?" His voice broke. "My hands just. Your hands protected me. Your hands have only ever been gentle with me." She kissed his forehead, his cheeks, the scar along his jaw. "Your hands made me feel safe for the first time in years." Julian surged up, capturing her mouth with desperate intensity. The kiss was raw, claiming, full of everything they'd been holding back. His bloodied hands gripped her waist, pulling her closer, and she tasted his fear and fury and need. "I love you." The confession tore from him between kisses. "God help us both. I love you, Evelyn. I've tried not to, tried to keep my distance, but I can't anymore." "Then don't." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "I love you too. All of you. The monster and the man." Julian stood, lifting her with him, and carried her to the couch where he'd spent the last 3 nights keeping watch while she slept. He laid her down gently despite the violence still thrumming through his muscles, his dark eyes searching her face. "Are you sure?" His voice was rough. "After everything you just saw." "I'm sure." She pulled him down to her. "Make love to me, Julian. Claim me. Show me I'm yours the way you want to, not the way he tried to force." What followed was tender despite Julian's bloodied knuckles, despite the violence that had preceded it. He undressed her with reverent hands, kissing every inch of skin he revealed, worshipping her with a gentleness that made her cry. When he finally entered her, their eyes locked, both understanding this was more than physical. It was a promise, a claiming, a choice they were making despite everything. Afterward, lying tangled together on the couch, Julian's arms wrapped protectively around her, Evelyn felt something she'd thought she'd lost forever. Peace. "I won't let him hurt you again," Julian murmured against her hair. "I won't let anyone hurt you. I know." She kissed his jaw. "And I won't let you face your demons alone anymore either. We're in this together now." Together. He repeated the word like a prayer. "I've been alone so long. I forgot what that word meant." "Then let me remind you." Evelyn snuggled closer. "Every day. For as long as you'll have me." Julian's arms tightened. "Forever, then. I'll have you forever." Outside, Marcus Jennings stumbled away from the estate with broken ribs, a shattered nose, and terror burning in his veins. Julian Cross had made his message clear. Evelyn Brooks was untouchable. But across the city, Antonio Russo smiled as he watched the security breach on his monitors. Marcus had failed, yes. But he'd proven something valuable. Julian Cross could be distracted. And distracted men made mistakes. The real game was just beginning. 7 days of peace felt like a lifetime and a heartbeat all at once. Evelyn had moved permanently into Julian's bedroom, her things mingling with his in the massive closet, her books appearing on his nightstand. They'd fallen into a rhythm, mornings tangled together, afternoons where she read while he worked, evenings discussing everything from literature to philosophy to the careful boundaries of his world that he was trying to make less dark for her sake. She was in the garden cutting roses for the dining room when it happened. The guard's name was Tommy. He'd been on Julian's payroll for 3 years, had passed every background check, had shown nothing but loyalty. Which is why nobody questioned when he told Evelyn that Julian needed her in the south greenhouse immediately. "He found something he wants you to see," Tommy said, his smile practiced. Said it was important. Evelyn should have questioned it. Should have called Julian first. But she was still learning to live without constant fear, still learning that safety meant trusting the world around her. She followed Tommy down the garden path. The cloth pressed to her face smelled sickly sweet. The world went dark before she could scream. Julian was in a meeting with his financial advisors when Vincent burst through the door, his face ashen. "Boss, we have a problem." The video arrived 30 seconds later, sent from an encrypted number to Julian's private phone. His blood turned to ice as he watched it load. Evelyn sat bound to a metal chair in what looked like a warehouse, duct tape across her mouth, terror bright in her eyes despite her attempts to hide it. The camera panned to show Antonio Russo standing beside her, one hand resting almost casually on her shoulder. Julian Cross. Russo's voice was smooth, pleased. "You've been very difficult to negotiate with lately. Perhaps this will help motivate some flexibility in your position." Russo's hand tightened on Evelyn's shoulder, making her flinch. Julian's vision went red. "The East Side territories. Sign them over to me by midnight, or I'll do things to your pretty little maid that'll make what Marcus did look gentle."
Husus milid. And Julian?
"I know you're calculating right now. Weighing options. Let me make it simple. You can have your empire, or you can have her. But you don't get both." The video ended. The conference room erupted in chaos. Vincent was already on his phone, mobilizing security. The financial advisors were gathering their papers with trembling hands. But Julian sat frozen, staring at the frozen image of Evelyn's terrified face on his screen. "Boss." Vincent ended his call. "We can find her. Give me 2 hours and you have 30 minutes. Julian's voice was deadly calm. "Assemble everyone. Every man we have. Every favor we're owed. Every weapon in our arsenal." "Boss, we can't go to war over," one of his lieutenants started. Julian's hand slammed on the table hard enough to crack the wood. "Over what?"
"Say it."
"Over a woman? Over my woman?" He stood, and every man in the room took an involuntary step back from the cold fury radiating off him. "She's not a bargaining chip. She's not a pawn. She's mine. And I'll burn this entire city to ash before I let Russo touch her." "The territories," another lieutenant tried, "are dirt and money. They can be rebuilt, reclaimed, renegotiated." Julian's jaw clenched. "She can't. So we're going to get her back. And then I'm going to kill Antonio Russo slowly enough that he regrets ever learning her name." Vincent nodded once. "I'll make the calls." "Vincent." Julian's voice stopped him at the door. "The guard who was with her when she was taken."
"Tommy."
"Find him. I want to know who he sold us out to and for how much before I kill him." "Already on it, boss." 40 minutes later, Julian stood in his armory selecting weapons with methodical precision.
Guns. Knives.
Everything he'd need for the kind of violence he was about to unleash. Around him, 20 of his most loyal men did the same, their faces grim with determination. "The warehouse is abandoned," Vincent reported, studying a tablet with satellite imagery. "South District, near the docks. Russo has maybe 15 men inside. He thinks you're going to negotiate." He thought wrong. Julian checked the magazine of his Glock, his movements controlled despite the fury coursing through his veins. "Love me while I'm alive." Evelyn's words echoed in his mind. "No survivors except Russo. I want him alive. Everything else is fair game." The warehouse reeked of rust and seawater when they breached the doors. Russo's men were expecting negotiation, not war. They died quickly, bullets to the head, knives to the throat, Julian moving through them like death incarnate. Every man between him and Evelyn was an obstacle to be eliminated with brutal efficiency. He didn't feel mercy, didn't feel hesitation. felt nothing except the driving need to get to her, to make sure she was alive, to end anyone who dared touch what was his. The screaming stopped after 5 minutes. By 7, Julian was kicking open the door to the room where they'd filmed the video. Evelyn was still bound to the chair, her eyes widening with relief when she saw him. Julian crossed to her in 3 strides, cutting the ropes with his knife, pulling the tape gently from her mouth. "Are you hurt?" His hands roamed over her frantically, checking for injuries. "Did he touch you? Did any of them?"
I'm okay.
Her voice shook, but her eyes were clear. "I knew you'd come. I never doubted it." Julian pulled her against him, breathing in her scent, feeling her heart beating against his chest.
Alive.
She was alive. "Always," he murmured into her hair. "I'll always come for you, Julian." Russo's voice came from behind them, pained. "You're making a mistake. The territories are worth." Julian turned, and Russo's words died at the expression on his face. Vincent had Russo on his knees, hands zip-tied, blood streaming from his broken nose. "The territories are worth nothing compared to her," Julian said softly, walking toward Russo with predatory grace. "You thought you could use her as leverage. Thought I'd choose power over love. You were wrong." He pulled his gun, pressing it to Russo's temple. "This is for thinking she was a weakness. For putting your hands on her. For making her afraid."
Julian, wait. Russo started.
Julian pulled the trigger. The ride back to the estate was silent except for Evelyn's quiet trembling. She sat pressed against Julian's side in the back of the SUV, his arm around her, his other hand never leaving his gun. He was covered in blood, some his from a graze to his shoulder, most from other men, but he held her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to humanity. "You killed them all," she finally whispered. "For me." "Yes. You gave up the territories. Your empire. Everything Russo wanted. I gave up nothing that mattered." Julian's grip tightened. "You're what matters. Only you." Evelyn pulled back to look at him, seeing the blood, the violence, the monster everyone feared, and choosing him anyway. "I love you. Even knowing what you're capable of. Even seeing it. I love you." "God help you," Julian murmured, kissing her forehead. "Because I love you too much to ever let you go. Even if the smart thing would be to send you somewhere safe, away from my world. I don't want safe if it means without you." She cupped his bloodied face. "I want this. I want you. All of you." Julian kissed her then, desperate and claiming, tasting like copper and violence and promise. When they pulled apart, both were crying. "We survived," Evelyn whispered. "We survived," Julian agreed. "And I'll make sure we keep surviving. Together." The water ran red. Evelyn sat in the massive shower stall fully clothed, watching Russo's blood swirl down the drain in pink spirals. Her hands shook as she tried to scrub it from her skin, blood that had splattered when Julian pulled the trigger, blood that marked her as complicit in violence she'd once sworn she'd never be part of. She didn't hear the shower door open, didn't register Julian's presence until he sat beside her, still in his blood-soaked clothes, and pulled her against his chest. "I'm sorry." His voice was raw, broken in a way she'd never heard before. "I brought this into your life. The danger, the violence, all of it. You were trying to escape monsters, and I made you live with the worst one of all." Evelyn's hands fisted in his ruined shirt, feeling the warmth of him beneath the cold, wet fabric. "Julian, if you want to leave, I'll understand." He continued as if she hadn't spoken, the words tumbling out with desperate urgency. "I'll set you up somewhere safe. New identity, new city, enough money that you'll never worry again. I'll protect you from a distance. But I'll understand if you can't look at me anymore without seeing." "Stop." Evelyn pulled back, forcing him to meet her eyes. Water streamed down both their faces, washing away blood and tears indiscriminately. "You think I want to leave? After you went to war for me? After you proved I'm worth more to you than your empire, your reputation, everything you've built?" You saw what I'm capable of. You watched me kill. I watched you save me. She cupped his scarred face in her hands. I watched you choose me over power. I watched you become the monster everyone fears because someone threatened me. And yes, it was terrifying. Yes, I'm still shaking. But not because I'm afraid of you, Julian. I'm shaking because I love you so much it terrifies me. His breath hitched. Evelyn. I love you, Julian Cross. All of you. The monster and the man. The killer and the person who brings me soup when I'm sick. The crime boss and the man who reads Dostoevsky by firelight. Her voice strengthened. You're my monster.
Mine.
And I'm not going anywhere. Julian made a broken sound and kissed her with desperate intensity, tasting like blood and rain and promise. They stayed there until the water ran clear, until the blood was gone, until only two broken people remained, choosing each other despite everything. 3 months later, autumn had given way to winter, and the Cross estate wore snow like a bride's veil. Evelyn stood in the library, their library now, not just Julian's, arranging books on the shelves with practiced ease. Her laptop sat open on the desk, an essay for her online English literature course half finished on the screen. After years of deferred dreams, she was finally pursuing her degree. Julian had insisted on paying for it, had converted one of the guest rooms into a study for her, had sat with her through late-night cramming sessions with the patience of a saint. Miss Brooks. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, her expression warm in a way it hadn't been when Evelyn first arrived. Mr. Cross asked me to tell you dinner will be ready in 30 minutes. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. Evelyn smiled. And please, you can call me Evelyn. I'm hardly staff anymore. No, you're certainly not. Mrs. Chen's eyes crinkled with amusement. Your family. And in 15 years of working for Mr. Cross, I've never seen him smile the way he does when you walk into a room. You're good for him, dear. You make him human. After Mrs. Chen left, Evelyn wandered to the window, watching snow fall over the gardens where she and Julian had first kissed. So much had changed since that day. The estate felt different now, less gothic prison, more gothic romance. The shadows were still there, but they felt protective rather than threatening. Julian had changed too, subtly but profoundly. He still ran his empire, still commanded fear and respect in equal measure. But he was walking the line between criminal and legitimate more carefully now, using her moral compass to guide decisions that had once been made purely from power. He divested from the drug trade entirely, had shifted focus to real estate, shipping, investments that towed the line of legality but didn't cross it. You're my conscience, he told her one night. The voice in my head asking if I can sleep at night after the choices I make. And can you? She'd asked. More than I used to. He'd pulled her closer. Because I have something worth sleeping peacefully for. The library door opened, and Julian appeared, snowflakes dusting his dark hair. He'd been out handling business. What kind, she didn't always ask, and he didn't always tell. But he was home now, and that's what mattered. You're staring, he said, crossing to where she stood by the window.
I'm admiring.
She turned into his arms, feeling them wrap around her waist. There's a difference. Is there? He kissed her temple. What are you admiring? The fact that you came back. That you always come back. She looked up at him. The fact that you're trying. Building something better. Not for your reputation or your empire, but because you want to be someone I can be proud of. Are you? Proud of me. Every day. She touched the tattoo on his neck, the rose wrapped in thorns that represented his mother. He'd added another recently, her name, in delicate script on his wrist.
A permanent là.
A promise. You made me want to be more than a monster, he'd said when he'd shown her. Julian's arms tightened. You made me want to be more than a monster. You made me believe I could be. And you made me brave enough to stop running. Evelyn smiled. Made me believe that broken people can build beautiful things if they're willing to put in the work. Are we? Beautiful? We're getting there. She kissed the scar on his jaw.
Slowly.
Together. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other while snow painted the world white outside. Two people who'd found each other in darkness and chosen to build something light. Mrs. Chun says dinner's in 30 minutes. Evelyn murmured against his chest. That's plenty of time. Julian's hands slid down her back with clear intent. For what? For me to show you exactly how much I love you. He pulled back to meet her eyes, and the heat in his gaze made her breath catch. For me to remind you that you're mine. For us too. Julian Cross, are you propositioning me in the library? Would you prefer somewhere else? Evelyn laughed, full and genuine and free in a way she'd once thought impossible. The library is perfect. Everything with you is perfect. Later, after dinner, after Mrs. Chun had cleared the dishes with a knowing smile, Evelyn and Julian returned to the library. They settled on the leather couch by the fire, books in hand, her feet in his lap, comfortable in the silence that came from two people who no longer needed to fill every moment with words. Julian's hand absently stroked her ankle, his thumb tracing circles over old scars that had faded to silver. She had scars from Marcus. He had scars from a lifetime of violence. But they wore them openly now, proof that they'd survived, that they were still here, still fighting, still loving. Evelyn. Thank you. His voice was quiet, sincere. For staying.
For choosing me.
For making me believe I deserved to be chosen. She set down her book and moved to straddle his lap, her hands framing his face. Thank you for seeing me when I was trying to be invisible.
For protecting me.
For loving me angry and scared and imperfectly. She kissed him softly. For being my monster. Julian's hands settled on her waist, holding her like she was something precious. Always. I'll always be your monster. And I'll always be your salvation. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the estate in pristine white. The Gothic mansion that had once loomed dark and threatening now glowed with warmth from within, a home, not a prison. A sanctuary built by two broken people who discovered that monsters could love and broken hearts could heal when given to the right hands. They weren't perfect. They were scarred, damaged in places that would probably never fully heal. But they were together. And sometimes that was enough. Sometimes, broken people built the most beautiful things. Their hands intertwined on the couch, scars visible in the firelight but no longer defining them. Just two people who'd found each other in darkness and chosen, every single day, to walk toward the light together. The end. Enjoyed this story?
Subscribe.
We've got dozens more about impossible choices, moral complexity, and the messy reality of being human. Don't miss the next one. Click below, and I'll see you soon.